Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Amanda Vinicky. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight,
it's about opportunity. It's about giving people a fair shot.
President Biden announces a student loan debt relief plan, what it means for borrowers, and will the plan address trillion-dollar student loan debt crisis?
A conservative group's political ad darkens Mayor Lightfoot's skin. Our Spotlight Politics team shares more.
Historically, 79th Street and Halsted were the downtown of Auburn Gresham.
Chicago's Planning and Development Commissioner on today's Invest Southwest groundbreaking.
Busing issues at Chicago Public Schools. Some rides are as long as 90 minutes to and from school. What's driving the problem?
The Chicago Sky are moving on to the semifinals.
The defending WNBA champs advance into the playoffs. We get a forecast for the Chicago Sky's chances.
They're all incredible musicians. Like, the band is just great.
And we introduce you to the Chicago band, A Sea, A Sea. But first, some of today's top stories. A drive-by shooting near a Northwest Side high school leaves 4 people wounded. Police say the victims were between 15 and 18 years old and were injured in the incident outside Carl Schurz High School this afternoon. Deputy Chief Roberto Nieves says he believes all 4 victims are Chicago Public Schools students.
What we know right now is that a dark SUV pulled up on Addison Avenue, and we possibly believe shots were fired from that dark SUV, striking our victims. That vehicle then fled eastbound on Addison Avenue. Our victims were taken to the hospital and are currently being treated.
And according to police, a 15-year-old boy was struck in the face and is currently in critical condition. Another 15-year-old boy was hit in the back. He's listed in good condition, as is a 17-year-old boy who sustained a graze wound to his leg. An 18-year-old man was also struck in the leg. 3 days into the school year, and more than 1,200 students across Chicago Public Schools do not yet have buses to get them to school. Hundreds of other students are currently having to deal with bus rides of more than an hour and a half each way. In the first board meeting since the start of the school year, CPS CEO Pedro Martinez said the district's student transportation is in a much better place than it was at this point last year, but also acknowledged ongoing problems. And we'll have much more on this story coming up in just a bit. Groundbreaking in Auburn Gresham on the first of more than 10 major construction projects tied to the city's Invest Southwest initiative. According to a city statement, the Auburn Gresham Apartments will be a 2-building complex with 58 units renting from $925 a month, a community center, and shopping and dining options. The almost $40 million development is supported with $18 million in tax increment financing and another $18 million in low-income tax credits. Mayor Lori Lightfoot was on hand for the groundbreaking. One she promised was just the first of many.
Throughout the remainder of this year, we're expecting to break ground on Invest Southwest investments in Inglewood, in Austin, North Lawndale, and more. But this one will also always be sweet and special because it was the first.
We're going to have more on Invest Southwest in a few minutes, but up next, what does the president's student loan relief plan mean for Americans and the economy? That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Relief is on the way for those struggling to pay off college debt. President Joe Biden is out with the plan that cancels up to $10,000 in federal loans for those making less than $125,000 a year. Low-income students who received Pell Grants will see their balance decline by double that, up to $20,000. The White House estimates the relief plan will impact more than 40 million borrowers nationwide. Biden says it will help people to get on with their lives.
The burden is so heavy that even if you graduate, you may not have access to the middle-class life that the college degree once provided. Many people can't qualify for a mortgage to buy a home because of the debt they continue to carry. they carry, it's too high. They can't come up with a down payment anyway. A lot of folks are even putting off starting families because of the cost.
Joining us to talk more about the student loan debt relief plan are Lynn Baker, Managing Director of Communications at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC, Constantine Yanellis, Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and Horacio Mendez, President and CEO at the Woodstock Institute. Constantine, let's begin with you. We know that the president has been under a lot of pressure to live up to his campaign promises and to deliver some student loan relief, but let's not go to the politics yet. Put this into perspective. Is the student loan debt at the point that it is a crisis that needs to be tackled?
Oh, absolutely. There are a great number of borrowers struggling, and a tremendous number of people have very high balances and low earnings and need some kind of relief.
How
and
did
the key question is
go ahead.
Getting the relief to the right people who need it the most without spending hundreds of billions or even trillions of dollars on upper income individuals.
How did this get to be such a problem, briefly?
Oh, it's been decades in the making, but essentially the government just allowing anyone to borrow a loan, regardless of whether they can afford it, and predatory schools hiking tuition to take advantage of these high loan limits.
Now, Horacio, let's go to you. What do you make of this plan? Does $10,000 go far enough? We've, of course, had some people calling for loans to be completely forgiven, and there are a lot of people that have way more than $10K in student loan debt.
Well, we were just talking before the show with the panelists that there was a lot of promise that we were hoping would come from some of the efforts to make higher education more affordable in the United States. And unfortunately, this doesn't get there. I think $10,000 in relief is better than nothing, but the $125,000 income cap, that means one thing in San Francisco and something very different in Mattoon, Illinois. So it's still not as needs-based as we think it could be. It's great that the Pell Grant program is going to target those who were low and moderate income when they went into college. But that doesn't necessarily mean that with a good school and a good degree that they're not making $120,000, $125,000 out of school, and they actually need the help. So there are a lot of assumptions being made here. $10,000, when you take into consideration the average in terms of what people have in terms of debt, will help. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to have the intended effect in the long run, but I think in the short run, it is going to be welcome help for a lot of people.
And Lynn, let's go to you now. This measure does call for other changes as well, namely that it puts a cap on how much borrowers will owe on their debt. So it caps it at 5% of discretionary income, again, for those at the lower income level. Explain more. How is that going to work?
So our understanding right now is that is for the income-based repayment program that the president is proposing. We don't have a lot of information yet about that program. But we understand that at least our understanding is that it would be for that program in particular, that 5%.
Lynn, anything else that the president has announced that really sticks out to you?
Well, it's also important to remember that the president also extended the pause on student loan repayment until December, so December 31st. So that's important as well. And so students need to sort of recognize that this is probably going to be the last extension and get themselves prepared for having to repay. That means they got to make sure that they're talking to their lender and making sure their lender has their information and their contact information.
Get prepared to start making those again. This is the sort of relief that began under President Trump due to the pandemic and has been going on for 2 years now, but time running out. Lynn, to that end, Constantine, that means that borrowers are going to have to begin to pay and begin making payments again on those loans come January. Oh, wait, that's just shortly after the elections. Is this timing political? Constantine?
I'm an economist, not a political scientist, but I think the timing speaks for itself. Very likely is.
Very likely. All right. So, Lynn, you sort of talked about this already in terms of what borrowers need to begin to keep in mind as they begin to make those payments. What else should they be thinking of, Lynn? Is this sure relief? Are there any sort of other financial calculations that those with outstanding debt need to begin to make?
Well, so first of all, I think it's important for borrowers to understand that right now, as far as we know, this is a one-time debt cancellation. So it's for loans that were dispersed prior to July 1st, 2022. So if you are a student in school now, you're about to take out more loans or you're about to take out your first set of loans, you shouldn't rely on the fact that those loans will be subject to any debt cancellation. We don't know that that's going to be the case. So knowing that, it's important for students on the front end to understand how to minimize their student loan debt going in.
All right, some important help there. Now, Horatio, we've talked about how some critics, you among them, say that this is not enough relief, but there are others who say that this is unfair to those who budgeted, paid off their loans, or those who chose not to go to college so they wouldn't have to take on these debts. How do you respond?
Well, unfortunately, when you're talking about the distribution of tax money, and particularly stimulus or benefit payments like this, there are going to be winners and losers. And I think that's why it's so important to get the rules right and to make sure that you have restrictions upon where the money is going. We want to make sure that there isn't relief for people that are going to be preyed upon by these high-cost colleges or some of these private companies that really have helped create this problem in the first place. So we're going to have to keep a look with regard to the regulations that get implemented and how well the government's able to actually target the money to where it's needed most. So the devil is going to be in the details. But like you said, not everybody is going to get helped. And very similar to what Lynn, and to build off of what Lynn just mentioned, this is a one-time fix. This is a Band-Aid. It's not going to prevent us being in another crisis like this in another few years. So there are some systemic issues that need to be addressed. And unfortunately, looking to Congress to fix systemic issues right now is not necessarily a productive thing to do.
Now, among those systemic issues is the cost of attending and getting a higher education, with tuition and fees skyrocketing as well. Should that be part of it, Horatio?
Yes, absolutely. I think to a certain degree, we need to really take a look to see whether or not our education system should be for profit. At the end of the day, there are so many wins across society and the economy for us to be able to have a well-educated, well-trained workforce across the gamut of income, race, ethnicity, and sex. Now, that's actually something that isn't always known, is the fact that this isn't just a racial equity issue with regard to repayment and debt relief. It's also something that has to do with gender. Our studies have shown that over 2/3 of people with student debt are women. So this is something that affects so much of the foundation from which our economy relies, and the ability of people to be paying actively into the tax system that supports everything from our medical care to Social Security, that it's really in our best interest to try to find a way to maximize the education level of our workers, so that way we all benefit. And right now, it's not really working out that way, because it's a situation that really benefits those that have the most money and can afford those costs, or go into an enormous amount of debt in the hope that they're able to work their way up the income ladder.
Realizing, of course, that this is a very complex issue, and among the other criticisms or sort of thoughts on this particular plan is what it might mean for inflation. Horatio, you've got a lot of thoughts about this. What would your prescription be? If you were able to get Congress to wave that magic wand, what would you have happen?
Oh, my dear Lord, what a question to ask. Well, first and foremost, this is a little bit of a stimulus check. I think the average payment for people with student loans is $300 a month. I'm not sure whether or not I have that right. Lynn may correct me. But that's putting it's like pocket money back into the system, which it's a little questionable whether that's going to be inflationary. It certainly is not going to be disinflationary. The magic wand with regard to, if I had one wish that were realistic, and I'm going to focus on that word realistic, would be maybe make the targeting of this relief based upon a percentage of area median income. So somebody in an area that has a good job, they have a degree, but they're struggling underneath student debt, I think their relief should be based upon the cost of living where they live, as opposed to a blanket $125,000 cap.
And we've got about 30 seconds left. And Lynn, I will go that to you. It's not just federally. There are also some changes on Illinois' front in regards to the monetary award program. Quick synopsis, please.
Yeah, so there's a big increase in the MAP funding this year. So it's over $600 million. So it's a huge increase in MAP, and it's an important program for low-income students.
So more money available for low-income Illinoisans to get a higher education. Though we lost him, our appreciation to Constantine Yanellis and also to Lynn Baker and Horatio Mendez.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to Paris for details on a new housing development coming to Chicago's South Side. Paris.
Amanda, Mayor Lightfoot made a splash today, breaking ground on a new $43 million development in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood on the city's south side. The mixed-use affordable housing project will be built at 79th and Halsted, once a thriving hub. The project is part of the city's Invest Southwest initiative, designed to bring new life to the city's south and west sides. And here to talk about the first project in the initiative is Chicago's Planning and Development Commissioner Maurice Cox. Commissioner Cox, welcome to Chicago tonight. So the rundown on this development: $43 million, city land donated, $18 million in TIF funds, and then $18 million in low-income tax credits. How did this project come to be selected as part of this $250 million Invest Southwest initiative?
Thank you for having me. This is the first of 10 commissions that were done through a competitive requests for developer proposals. We announced this in October of 2019. We had our first community kickoff in February 2020, and we announced the winners last year in March. So it was an amazing display of bringing equitable development to these 10 community areas that Mayor Lightfoot has targeted for reinvestment.
And as I understand with this development, it's going to be affordable housing, but you also have commercial space. You've got a grocery store going in there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a mixed use. There are actually two buildings, one with 30 units and another with 28. Each of them have a ground floor, pedestrian-oriented, local amenities. There's a West African foods group that is moving into the ground floor of one. There is a park, supper club, and restaurant in another. So these are the kind of locally serving amenities that we all want and enjoy in neighborhoods, and they're finally coming to Auburn Gresham.
Yeah, I know residents certainly want commercial activity at that corner, once a thriving hub, although there were some community meetings last year where many of the residents pushed back on having more affordable housing units. Were their concerns listened to?
Oh, in fact, we awarded the commission to Evergreen Imagine, a joint venture partnership, and it was a 5-story building. I think all 58 of those units were located on one site. And the community felt that it was out of context, too dense for one site. So we started over again and basically worked shop with the architects and developers and community stakeholders 3 months to come to a conclusion, which actually is better for everyone. 2 buildings, instead of a $21 million investment, it doubled and became a $43 million investment. It creates the original site will have a 3-story building, and then the 100% corner of Halsted in 79th Street will have a 5-story building, and that will bring you that much closer to the new metro station. So this becomes a ETOD, an Equitable Transit-Oriented Development district, and that came from the community's insights as to what was the right thing to do at that site.
So it sounds like a collaborative process here. And you mentioned this is the first of 10 projects in this $250 million Invest Southwest initiative. You've got one coming up in Inglewood and then in Austin at the old Laramie Bank building. Can you just tell us briefly about those?
Sure. The Inglewood, at Inglewood Square, there was a wonderful firehouse that has been long since been vacant. And the community asked us to reimagine what it could be. We worked with the community, put out visions to solicit developers' interest. We had considerable interest, and we chose Inglewood Connect, which is a joint venture between McLaren Development and Farpoint. And they are reimagining the firehouse as a culinary hub with a commercial kitchen, with event space, and ultimately a place where restaurants will be created that will then populate the Inglewood.
And I should jump in because you have Kennedy King College there, which does specialize in training folks for culinary careers. I wanted to jump in with Inglewood there while we're on the subject. The Whole Foods that has been there for 6 years had announced it's going to close. Do you know what's going to go in there after it, or what might replace it?
Well, I know the developer, DL3, Leon Walker, is currently soliciting other grocers to move into that space. It's a key part of the ecosystem of what we're trying to create. We're going to help by making sure that there are residents within a walkable distance to patronize that grocery store. Leon Walker, who also competed for an Invest Southwest commission, recently has been awarded a tax credit to build 60 units of housing on 63rd and Holstead, right next to the box for the grocery store. So this will be families that will be able to walk to a grocery store. And we've always said you have to build the rooftops in order to hold those anchor amenities like a grocery store. So I'm pretty confident. He says the site is highly sought after, and the momentum that's happening around him is helping him to market that site.
So, yeah, I know you've been critical in the past of that development because it's more of a car-oriented development, and you want more pedestrian-oriented developments there. While I have you, I got to ask you about Google moving into the Thompson Center. Do you see that as a catalyst for the Loop?
Oh, it's an amazing anchor for the reimagining of LaSalle. You know, to have the CTA stop there, to have a crossroads, to have an amazing public space, and to have 2,000 new jobs that anchor that end of LaSalle, I think is a perfect send-off for our effort to reimagine the future of LaSalle in both directions. And then, speaking of directions, a little bit north of there, the Magnificent Mile struggling a little bit with vacancy, a little over 20%. What's your vision to rehabilitate some of the buildings that have been lost there? Well, we've worked with ULI, came in and did one of their technical assistance workshops and brought some amazing ideas that are implementable, they're incremental, bringing food and beverage to the street, animating some of the side streets that will allow people to clearly see where the lake is, making connections off the street. And then, you know, in the short term, a more tactical approach to getting new retail, pop-up retail in those vacant spaces. So while we think long-term about what are the new tenants that are needed in anchor spaces, there's a lot we can do to animate and activate storefront activity.
And a lot, as you mentioned, being animated and activated in Auburn Gresham, and then to come Inglewood and Austin with the Laramie Bank. And Commissioner Maurice Cox, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And up next, what CPS is doing about busing issues for hundreds of students. So please stay with us.
We've made it.
Justice Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court provides a beacon of hope.
Black women are underrepresented. We still rise. We still show up for one another.
It's us investing in the next generation and giving them something to enrich the next generation with.
As we mentioned earlier, more than 1,200 students across Chicago Public Schools don't have bus transportation to get to school. This as hundreds of other students are sitting on more than 90-minute rides to and from school each day. CPS Chief Pedro Martinez spoke at today's first Board of Education meeting of the school year. He says he can relate.
I'm very concerned about those very long routes, because if you're one of those 365 families, at the end of the day, it's your child. I get it. I have 2 children in CPS. You want to know when it's going to, what's going to be fixed for your child. I get it.
And WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. Matt, before we get to the school bus issue, CPS put out a statement this evening on that shooting at Shores High School that have wounded 4 kids at this point. What did it say?
The district said that the school went into a lockdown briefly while CPD responded to the shooting that occurred outside the school. They said they would have more information for the school community later, and that they wanted to express that their thoughts were with those 4 individuals who were injured in the shooting today.
All right, a lot of folks holding their breath tonight, hoping that those folks are okay. On to the school bus issue, Martinez says the district's transportation capacity has improved over last year, but still the average bus trip is 39 minutes. More than 80% of them are under an hour. But for 365 diverse learners that do have a ride, it's more than 90 minutes each day. So how did it get to this point?
So this has been a problem for the last couple of years across Chicago Public Schools, but Martinez said it's not just a local problem, it's actually a national problem. He's pointed to a nationwide bus driver shortage as being the root of the cause of these issues that the city's had. And while CPS may be in a better spot than it was at this time last year in terms of routing kids on these buses, it's clearly still a major issue for several parents and families in the district.
And Martinez was on this program on Monday talking about that issue a bit. Did he reveal a plan to address this?
CPS said that of those, there's about 1,200 students right now who have no bus ride. And he said about half those kids will have a bus route by this time next week. The other half should have a bus route by Labor Day week, the week following that. For now, CPS is providing a monthly stipend payment to families to help cover transportation costs for those who don't have bus routes. For general education students, they can get free CTA bus passes as well. And Martinez said that the district has upped its hourly pay for bus drivers up to $20 an hour in an effort to try to hire more bus drivers so that it can fill some of those existing vacancies that they have.
So even with a plan in the works, Matt, Martinez told parents today at the board meeting that they should be realistic about the situation. Take a listen.
I want to be realistic. I don't see us getting 100% of our routes under an hour. I just don't see that as a possibility, but we're going to try.
What's the response from parents to those comments?
Parents, of course, have been upset by that. But the fact that they don't have bus routes, this did last much longer into the school year last year, but the fact that it is the first week of school and kids don't have a guaranteed route there, it's a problem. The Chicago Teachers Union official, Maria Moreno, spoke at the Board of Education today, and she said that it's wrong that kids either don't have routes or are sitting on buses for over an hour and a half or close to 2 hours. And while the increased pay for drivers is a step in the right direction, it's not enough.
All right, Matt, thanks for following that for us. And you can read Matt's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. And now, Amanda, we toss it back to you.
Thanks, Paris. Still to come on Chicago tonight, the Chicago Sky is heading to the WNBA semifinals. Plus, coach and GM James Wade signs a contract extension. Our Spotlight Politics team on who and what's behind the political ad that darkened Mayor Lori Lightfoot's skin. Plus, a Mexico City native talks about his musical journey with his band in Chicago and how he adds texture to his music. But first, some more of today's top stories. More on that drive-by shooting near Carl Schurz High School on Chicago's northwest side this afternoon. Deputy Chief Roberto Nieves says he believes all 4 victims, aged between 15 and 18, are Chicago Public School students.
1 victim is in critical condition, 2 victims are in serious condition, and 1 victim is in good condition. Currently, the detectives and our officers are investigating in the area. They're seeking video and any other type of evidence and speaking to individuals. What we ask from the community is if they have any information or if anyone was in the area and might have observed anything, if they can please contact the Area 5 Detective Division at 312-746-6554.
Nieves says there will be an enhanced police presence around the school beginning tomorrow morning. Hundreds of members of Chicago's Ukrainian community gathered in Daley Plaza to commemorate Ukraine's independence. On the 31st anniversary of the country's declaration of independence following the collapse of the Soviet Union, today's event celebrated Ukrainian culture. It also celebrated Ukraine's resistance and resilience 6 months after Russia's brutal invasion. Among the speakers was Ukraine's Consul General in Chicago, who expressed his confidence that Russia will be defeated.
Despite of severe challenges my country faces now, I am confident that we will win our struggle for freedom, democracy, and European values. Ukraine will always be free, sovereign, and independent state with open heart to all peaceful nations.
The hope of being repeat champions is still alive for the Chicago Sky. The team took down the New York Liberty 90-72 last night, winning their second straight elimination game. That pushes the Sky into WNBA semifinals. Here to talk about the Sky's prospects for the rest of the playoffs is Shakia Taylor, a deputy senior content editor with the Chicago Tribune. Thanks so much, Shakia. Now, for starters, just what's your reaction to last night's win?
Last night's win was amazing. I mean, if you're a Sky fan, it was a super fun game to watch. Just watching the team dominate the Liberty. And after game one, you know, no one knew what to expect. Game two, they came out and they absolutely throttled them. And then game three, we got more of the same dominant basketball from the Sky. Being able to stifle Sabrina Ionescu and all of the other talented players on the Liberty is huge.
And it got kind of close there before they really slammed in the end. Now, the Sky's real MVP is relatively new to the team, but not at all to Chicago. Brag some about Naperville Central grad Candice Parker. How's she playing?
Candice Parker is playing out of this world this season. I said about midway through the season that I felt like she was on a revenge tour. She's constantly setting new records and putting herself, you know, in the top 10 and top 5 and just history-making positions with the W this season. And her stat line is pretty much incredible. You're going to get a good, you know, 25, 30 minutes out of CP with 14 points, and you know she's just constantly going for double doubles and near triple doubles. It's been a stellar season for Candice Parker.
What about some of the other players and highlights of the game?
Some of the other players I think that you know are standing out right now. Obviously, Courtney Vandersloot, Allie Quigley hit those back-to-back threes last night that pretty much silenced all of New York. And if you're a Chicago fan, you love to see a New York crowd go quiet. Emma Miesemann was, I mean, an absolute amazing addition by Wade. Rebecca Gardner, I made a joke last night on Twitter, you know, that like a good neighbor, Rebecca Gardner's always there. Like her defense was just, I mean, she was incredible coming off the bench. And then you have Azare Stevens, who is another big. She plays center forward, basically like Candice Parker. But having her out on the court, she's coming off the bench and putting up 15 points. She's making a difference. It's definitely been a full team effort from the Sky. It's not just CP, it's everybody.
So you're clearly keyed into this. I admit I watched some of the game last night, but for those who don't, or they don't want to watch any women's sport, why should they? Convince them. Why turn on a Sky game?
Well, well, my first thing with the Sky is they're winning. Who doesn't want to watch a winning team? I used to make fun of people who join bandwagons, and then one of my friends was like, well, everybody likes a winner. And I think that's number one. They're winning. Watch. And don't wait until they're in the finals where the city can claim something. Support them now. The Sky, I won't say that they're lacking in support. They're, you know, averaging more than 7,000 fans per home game in the regular season. So people are showing up. But I think the city should get behind them. They're a fun team. They're playing good basketball. And they're the most competent professional sports team in the city right now. No one wants to say it, but no one knows what's going to happen with any of the men's pro teams. So we got this women's team who is absolutely balling. I think the city should buy in right now.
So the Sky, in fact, so balling that they could be the first repeat champions since 2002. And you have written about, as we've just talked about, how the Sky really hasn't gotten as much love. Gotten love, but not as much as the local pro men's teams. So why do you think that is?
People have their, their preconceived notions about women's ball. First of all, it's that it's women. That's just straightforward. People, men specifically, sometimes will say they don't want to watch women play. The other part is, I think people don't realize the level of basketball that's being played. You often see people say, like, their 12-year-old could be a WNBA player, or they could. And it's like, no, you could not. You absolutely could not. These women would beat any of us and wouldn't break a sweat. So people who aren't watching, I think they're paying attention and they're just trying to be surly, trying to take away from the shine that the team deserves. There's no good reason to not watch other than you're being a hater.
I cannot imagine having even a tenth of the athleticism that those athletes and those players have. Now, a coach and GM, so not a player, but also success story, James Wade, signing a contract extension through the 2025 season. Is that a good move for the team?
I think so. Coach Wade has taken the team to the playoffs in consecutive seasons. He has made some very smart decisions as a GM. Regardless of how you feel about his in-game decisions from game to game, he's making a difference. The players obviously buy in, they're winning. He was able to bring back much of last year's team. And I think the team has some stability when you know who the coach is, right? Like, when you know who's going to be there, players are willing to buy into the coach's philosophy.
And the highest winning percentage of any Sky coach. Now, last question.
Right.
We don't have a ton of time left. No, not at all. Looking forward to Sunday's game. We're going to find out tonight whether it is going to be the Connecticut Sun or the Dallas Wings. So, short answer, who would you rather the Sky be up against?
I'd rather they go up against the Sun, simply because they beat the Sun every time they matched up against them in the regular season.
Good reason. Well, go Sky, and we know you'll be watching. Our thanks to Shakira Taylor.
Thank you.
Up next, our Spotlight Politics team on the President's Student Loan Relief Plan. Stay with us.
As we heard earlier, President Joe Biden unveils his student debt relief plan as he pre-butts the opposition to that plan. All that and much more in our Spotlight Politics segment. And we welcome back in Amanda Vidicki and our very own Heather Sharon. Good to see both of you. Let's get right to it. In a speech today, Biden took aim at the Republicans who are critical of his plan.
I will never apologize for helping Americans, working Americans, middle class, especially not to the same folks who voted for a $2 trillion tax cut that mainly benefited the wealthiest Americans and the biggest corporations.
So, Heather, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the program, but remind us who this benefits.
Well, it benefits people who make less than $125,000 a year or $250,000 a year if you're married and filing jointly. If you did not get a Pell Grant, you could get about $10,000 in relief. But if you did get a Pell Grant, you'll get $20,000 in relief. And that's designed to help those who were most in need of aid while attending college, since Pell Grants are given based on financial need.
And Amanda, Republicans almost universally opposed to this plan. Democrats not exactly universally in support of it. How does it play into the midterms?
It's certainly not universal support from Democrats. Many saying we want all cancellations, total forgiveness, completely, that this is nowhere near enough. That said, does that help in the midterms? Sure. People aren't going to say no to getting any of that money back. Does that motivate Democrats to necessarily get to the polls? Perhaps if you're one of the people who would be advantaged, yes. But I know I've talked to folks who say, this isn't going to make nary a dent in what I owe, and there's certainly frustration. But I think voters, particularly we have seen in primaries that played out yesterday, abortion is certainly something that seems to be bringing folks to the polls, particularly for Democrats.
And preservation of democracy as well, according to a poll that came out this week. Let's move on to some state news here. Mayor Lori Lightfoot slams a conservative PAC for appearing to darken her skin in an anti-J.B. Pritzker ad. The ad's creator, radio host Dan Proft, denied the claim. In a quote, he says, This is an insane assertion and par for the course from inveterate race hustlers like Lightfoot in Pritzker. Heather, Lightfoot calls this a dog whistle. First of all, do we know for sure whether they purposely darkened the pigmentation here in this ad?
Well, in a statement Dan Proft sent to me, he said that he did not, and it was just a terrible allegation. But the mayor seemed fully convinced that this was done to not only sort of gin up sort of concern about crime in Chicago, but that it was one of the oldest tricks in the book when you're attacking a black politician, and that she said that she wasn't going to stand for it, regardless of what Dan Proft says.
And Amanda, the GOP nominee for Governor Darren Bailey, said he had nothing to do with this ad. This is a PAC that is spending money against J.B. Pritzker, but not necessarily for Darren Bailey. So remind us this PAC, the people behind them. Dan Proft, as we mentioned, also conservative billionaire Dick Uihlein.
Yeah, and so this is money, really, that Uihlein has given to Proft's PAC. And he's given a lot of money. $15 million since the primary. So you did have Darren Bailey receive money from Uihlein, millions of dollars, leading up to the primary, but not since. And that is certainly a matter of consternation from Bailey supporters who are sort of wondering. There was, in fact, a post on a conservative Illinois website. Where is Dick Uihlein? Why isn't he coming through for Darren Bailey, and what is going on? Instead, it seems, as you described it, Paris, that the money is going through Proft, who has a conservative radio AM show, was a political consultant, and by the way, ran for governor, obviously unsuccessfully himself some years back, funneling through this PAC. And as you noted, it's more anti-Pritzker than it is getting out the vote for Bailey, particularly with that ad where a quote from it, it's really stop Chicago violence from coming to your town, and blaming Pritzker for that.
And Uihlein, Mr. Uihlein has given tens of millions of dollars to conservative candidates through Mr. Proft. They've had this relationship for many years. That's a lot of money. That's a nice income stream for Mr. Proft, having this relationship with Mr. Uihlein.
Uihlein can afford it, though, Paris.
What's that?
He owns. Uihlein can certainly afford it.
Uihlein can afford it. I'm saying it's a nice income stream for Proft,
totally.
Who's also on the radio. Okay, let's move on to Governor J.B. Pritzker. He pours $5.5 million into the state Democratic Party. Amanda, just a coincidence that this happens after his preferred pick becomes the head of the Democratic Party, supplanting Robin Kelly, whom he did not want in there?
No, not a coincidence at all. This is his money, and it is now his chair in that position. He also gave money, by the way, to the Senate president and to the Speaker of the House, but nowhere near as much money. He certainly waited until Kelly was out and Hernandez was in that position. You would talk to folks close to Pritzker, and they say that really this is nothing personal against Kelly. Rather, it is because she's a federal office holder. There were concerns about her ability to fundraise, and perhaps he didn't want to get tangled into that or any question, particularly as there's a specter of his looking at a potential White House run down the future. But this sure feels personal to Kelly, and yes, make note of that timing. All
right, let's move to some city politics. Heather, there was an interesting article in the Tribune about 40% of Chicago voting precincts are eliminated with this newly drawn map. How come, and could that hurt voter turnout?
Well, it certainly could, and there are some people who are concerned about that. But this is more a reflection, according to the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, that the way people are voting has changed. We know that vote by mail is very popular throughout Chicago and in Illinois, so that there are fewer people voting in person on Election Day, so there's fewer sort of polling places needed. It's also become really difficult for elections operators to recruit election workers, poll judges, and to work at those precincts. So this, they hope, will help consolidate efforts, make it possible for everybody who wants to vote on Election Day to vote on Election Day. And of course, there's early voting, which means that really 40 days before Election Day, anyone can vote at various locations throughout the city. So this, I think, is more a sign of the times than any sort of indication that it's going to be significantly harder to vote in Chicago.
Maybe more confusing. People will have to do an extra check before they go to their polling place. That might be the biggest change for people.
And it's very important that they get this settled, because there's not one, but two major elections in Chicago coming up, the midterms, and then just a couple months after that, the mayoral election, the civic election. The total number of people running for Chicago mayor is nearing double digits. But let's start right now with who is not running. That's Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates. She says she's out. Take a look at what she said.
Why aren't you running for mayor?
Well, because I like my job.
Heather, she says she likes her job, but the Chicago Teachers Union is a big player in Chicago politics. Clearly, they want a candidate that they can support. Might there be another one?
I fully expect the Chicago Teachers Union to endorse a candidate. Stacey Davis Gates was just elected president of the Chicago Teachers Union. I think she had very little appetite to win that post, which she has sought for many, many years, and then turn around and take on a whole new challenge. Now, there's no doubt that the Chicago Teachers Union wants to see a new mayor in 2023, and a lot of people are waiting to see what Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson does. He's very close with CTU, and he is weighing a mayoral run. We will have to wait and see if he will pull the trigger.
And in fact, he was asked about that at that event this week, and he was staying pretty mum on that, which leads you to believe that he might be the candidate that they want to support. He's been very close with them. Amanda, so many questions, though. I mean, who are the candidates that are not in this picture yet that are going to declare? Who is the business community going to support? Do we know answers to any of these?
We don't know answers to any of those questions just yet, but we do expect that people are going to make their declarations, their candidacy decisions sooner than later. Look for the field to be more finalized by Labor Day, or at least in terms of who's entering. You constantly have to wonder if there will be any folks that drop out once polling starts to make particularly clear that they don't have a chance, or fundraising, what have you. Perhaps you might see more of that, but look for around Labor Day. And certainly, as Heather indicated, Johnson is a name that we continually hear. You also have Judy Friedland, and who else? Oh, Pat Quinn. That has sort of said, yeah, I'm interested. I want the job. Let's see who else enters.
Testing the waters here. And every now and then, you know, a new campaign just kind of pops up on the campaign website of the Illinois elections website. Like, oh, I didn't know that person was running. So it's surprising all
Still
of us.
Still not as many as the last mayoral election.
We're as surprised as all of you are out there as the viewers. All right, let's talk about the city's violence. It's a big issue. But also the placement of Chicago's statues. That's become an issue here. 3 Columbus statues. Heather, the mayor's commission finally came out with this report on taking down. They want to take down these statues permanently. And this report's been kind of high. The mayor kind of sat on this for a while, and now she's saying she doesn't agree with everything in this report. Does that mean that those Columbus statues might actually go back up?
Well, I asked her that directly, and she sidestepped the question, saying that she does not believe in erasing history, and in the past she's equated permanently removing these statues with doing just that. But she said there will have to be a safety plan in place for the Columbus statues to go back up. And she said she had yet to see any plan that would prevent police officers from putting themselves at risk to protect those statues. She said that was something she was not willing to ask them to do, which leaves these statues and 10 other monuments that are really designed to highlight white supremacy and honor racists in limbo, where they've been for the last 2 years after Mayor Lightfoot vowed to sort of take the energy that surrounded the outrage over the police murder of George Floyd and turn that into a racial reckoning and healing project. We're no closer to any sort of healing than we were 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, Heather, the mayor put this commission together. They come out with this report, very clear recommendation on 13 statues that they believe should be permanently removed. And then the mayor says, well, I don't necessarily agree, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what I don't agree with. Do you think that she kind of wants this issue to maybe disappear before the election and maybe not have to take a strong stand on it?
Well, she's certainly between a rock and a hard place. Whatever she does is going to make a certain group in Chicago very, very angry, and nobody wants to make anyone angry, just as petitions for that mayoral race are starting to hit the streets on Tuesday, in fact. I
know the Italian Americans, some of their groups have very strong opinions on this, and they can get politically active as many other groups. Amanda, before we go here, a very obscure Chicago billionaire gives $1.6 billion to a conservative group run by the Federalist Society's co-chair, a guy named Leonard Leo. He guided many of the conservative Supreme Court picks over the last several years. Who is this person, and what does this big contribution mean?
Pretty remarkable to be an obscure billionaire, especially in Chicago, big city, but you'd think you would know more about him.
We knew all the billionaires.
Yeah. His name is Barside, and he is owner of and really came to grow his largesse through a surge protector company that amassed a lot of wealth, as you had a lot of data centers. This is huge, believed to be the largest political donation to a political advocacy group, reporting on it, saying even in this money-drenched world, past Citizens United, a huge amount of money. So certainly powers the conservative base.
Billions of dollars being thrown around in politics all over the place, and that's where we'll have to leave it. We move the spotlight, I should say, to a Chicago singer and songwriter, but first we take a look at the weather.
The songwriter and frontman of Chicago band Azare writes and sings in Spanish, but the only language Fernando Dubuin's bandmates share with him is the language of music. Dubuin, who moved to Chicago from Mexico City a decade ago, says that seeming disconnect adds texture to their music, which layers psychedelic, electronic, and surf sounds to create a moody blend of indie rock.
I heard this somewhere and it resonated with me. 99% of writing music is like failing until the 1% where you don't. When I was writing some music, I tried this exercise of like sitting in a room for like 12 hours straight and writing as many songs as you can, like 12 songs or whatever. And most of it was absolute trash. But the seed for this one song came out. The song is called Descubrimientos, which means like discoveries. I don't have a specific story or idea behind it. It's more like a feeling of it, of like these moments where you're like, you speak too soon, kind of a thing. So the lyrics kind of reflect that idea. We worked remotely a lot on this particular song. We would sit down on Zoom, sharing audio of the computer, and just like record the demo and build it up and do different arrangements. But then when we came here to the studio to record it, it went from being like this thing recorded in segments over Zoom in bedrooms to like the full band, and now it has a much more lush sound because of that. I'm originally from Mexico City, but I've moved to Chicago 10 years ago. I learned to write songs in Spanish. I've tried to write in English and I just can't. It's terrible, like really bad. But then also, you know, when we were writing this record and when Azare started playing, you know, it's past administration, not that so many things have changed, but like there was a very active like voice against diversity. And I think we also took a stance of like, no, actually, it's okay to sing in Spanish. There's a lot of people that speak Spanish in the world and in this country, and let's just sing in Spanish, because why not?
CIC's debut album, Mal de Otros, was released this past week. We're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. The road to safer bike lanes and crossroads in North Center following a string of deaths and injuries. We have a live report as part of our In Your Neighborhood series.
And as Ukrainians celebrate 31 years of independence, the war with Russia hits the 6-month mark. And we leave you tonight with some more from the band ACAC. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Good night and enjoy the tune.